Now it's time to cut the sides to height and shape these handles. The sides of the box, I only wanted about 1/5 of the width of the box in height. So 12 divided by 5 is about 2.4 inches, 2 3/8 inches, something like that, which means I need to cut this height down a little bit before I assemble. So I'll go back to my setup block, reset the height and the angle of my blade, and I'll cut the width of these at 2 3/8 plus another 1/4 of an inch for the angle. The shaping for the ends of the boards becomes a little bit more tricky because everything's at an angle. But if you remember, looking at this from a vertical perspective, the outside is going to be taller than the inside. So if I'm scribing a line on the outside, I can safely cut a square to that and then shave that down with a router or with a hand plane or perhaps a spoke shave. To do that, again, I'm going to use my block here to line things up square and just mark where the ends of those boards come on the outside of each of the ends. And I'll be able to draw my entire design on the tape. And I'll do the same thing for the other piece. What I've decided on for this handle shape is not a curve, but because I'm going to kind of do an Art Nouveau type design on this with the ends, I'm going to use more of a squared block to the handle hold with an oval that's more of a rounded corner rectangle, I guess, for the handhold here. I've transferred my pattern to the two end pieces. You'll notice that I've done a couple of things like mirroring the end angles here to match the opposite cutoff from the edges, each of the edges, so that it's an inverse, same pattern, same shape. Again, the same thing where I took these down. The inside corner of the handle is going to be a 1/4 inch radius using a 1/2 inch bit, and the outside curve here goes up to a 3/4 inch radius. The difference in here is about an inch, but I decided I wanted to move these cutouts in by a 1/4 of an inch or so. It looks a little bit too long to me, so that's one little tweak I'll make as I actually do the final cutout. I want my handholds cut parallel with the bottom of the tray. Now this can be done a couple of different ways, the simplest of which is probably to use a Forstner bit and drill the holes into the end of the handholds on a drill press. Tilt the angle of the drill press to the angle of the sides of the tray. You're going to have to use a jigsaw or something else to cut the top and the bottom. You set the angle of the jigsaw using your setup block. That isn't right. For me, the PantoRouter offers the perfect solution. Clamping on the PantoRouter is a little bit different when it comes to clamping angled pieces. What I have here is my setup block, a sacrificial piece backer for coming all the way through on the handle, and then down here at the bottom, this is just a piece of cutoff from actually cutting the top and bottom angles on the boards in the first place. That allows me to clamp this firmly to the cutoff block, so this isn't going anywhere. I have a stop block down on the other end so that I only have to find center one time. I have the centering jig inserted into my router up here at the top, set into the center hole to ensure that everything's locked in place and centered. I've lined up the jig so that middle is in the middle, and you can see that the center hole is lining up with my pin. I have my bearing guide set in the groove. I've got it set for the mortising for the long slot mortiser. I've lined up so that the jig measures 3/4 of an inch from the top of the board to the top of the 1/2 inch centering jig. So that should be the top of my bit, giving me 3/4 of an inch drop to the handle. I took a look at it and it looks like it's gonna line up right where I want it to. Possibly a hair lower than what I had said originally, but that's fine. It'll give me a little bit of room to do some final shaping and sanding off the top here and still leave it at a 3/4 of an inch handle on the top. The gantry really needs to be set pretty high unless I were to flip this board upside down, which would be fine, but I've got it clamped in already, so I'm going to go with this. So what I've done is I've measured how far, there we go, up from resting this square on the guide block here where you'd normally put a piece of wood, and measured the side of the gantry there and the opposite side to make sure that they are the same height and it'll be straight across. Additionally, I've brought this up along the tape, pulled it along, and kind of cut a groove in my tape. And I can see that it's an even mark there. My top of my bit is going to be about 1/4 of an inch above that. Nominally, it's going to be a little bit different because of the angle. And it's going to go in at the angle that I want it to. I'll do the same process to determine how high up from the bottom I want this slot to go. At the top, I want the top slot to be a 5-inch wide slot. I'm using a 1/2 inch bit, so I've lined up the 1/2 inch with the 5, and that'll be my stop. At the bottom, it's going to be a little bit wider to mirror that angle that I have for my cutoff, the 1:3 ratio. So I'll just slide this out to a little bit wider for the whole slot length. I think it was like 5 and don't remember. I'll have to take a look at it, but I'll just do a double check on that and make sure that everything lines up with my angle that I have predetermined. Here I'm shaping the handles on the bandsaw after I have the opening cut. Here I'm just shaping the corners of the insides of the handles, taking out the excess with a chisel. Shaping the handle ends with the angles to match what I've drawn. I'm going to stay proud of the line so that it's close and I can do the final sanding when it's all assembled. So start off with a spoke shave, get bulk of the material. I could use a curved spoke shave in there. It's just as easy to use a file. So up a little higher though. Now I'm going to be using my Iwasaki files. I have a medium and a fine to smooth out these edges, make sure that everything's nice and flat in here, and a little bit of sandpaper. want to ease these edges so that it's not a sharp, sharp corner. And I'll give it a final sanding once I have everything assembled. It's really important to make sure that I get all of the scratch marks from the files out of these corners here. There are going to be some very visible places once the finish is on. Taking away these sharp edges will make it so that when I grab the handle, when you grab onto the tray, you're not going to have sharp edges cutting into your hand. So it's really important to have a good feel there too. Get the idea there. For these ends, find that the Iwasaki files are really helpful in getting these small areas in here really smooth so that there's no roughness left from the chopping it out or running the router. It's very rough. Like and subscribe to see the next video on making and fitting the bottom of the tray. Boring.